There is no cure for ME, CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalomyelitis, but there is at least a technique you can use to manage the symptoms, to avoid crashing, to avoid flare-up of symptoms, and that treatment is called pacing, whereby you find your energy envelope, which is the amount of energy you can expend before you cause a crash. So once you find your energy envelope and you stay below it, you should level out. Should being the operative word, because actually it's not that simple. This is like fatigue chess. Hey folks, it's Finn. Welcome back, lovely people. Thank you so much for tuning in to another video. So today is a bit of a catch up about what's going on with this tricky health of mine, Fred, and to tell you a little bit more about how I'm managing this chronic fatigue and all the symptoms that go with it. So I haven't as yet had an official diagnosis of ME/CFS, but I'm pretty much resigned to the fact that that is what it is now. That's what the doctor suspected. We've had every test imaginable that's come back as negative. And the only remaining thing now is there's some stuff happening with my heart, and I've got a cardiologist appointment next week to discuss some findings. But whatever that is, isn't going to explain everything else. So it's very likely that this is ME/CFS, because actually heart symptoms are quite common with ME. It's a strange thing because I always knew ME as being about fatigue. But actually it's far more than that, you know. It affects the whole adrenal system, the endocrine system, everything, you know, and it affects me very much in terms of my heart, palpitations, pounding, really strange stuff. So we will be getting towards a diagnosis, and as much as I don't want that, I'm accepting it now, better than I was, and right now I'll be grateful for a diagnosis so that I can then access some support, because I do need some help to manage this. And this is the thing, you see, with ME/CFS, there's no cure, there is just managing the symptoms, managing your energy so you don't crash. And the way you do this is with something called pacing, which I've been trying to learn over the last few months. And I'm not doing so great at it. Now, pacing is as simple as you find your level of energy that you can manage to exert without having a flare-up of symptoms or a crash of fatigue. Now, it does sound straightforward, right? But it isn't. Now, I'm used to kind of pacing with my mental health. And this is where the two differ. Because with my mental health, my biggest problem is anxiety. And I've learned over the last kind of 10, 11 years since I've been in recovery from drug and alcohol abuse that I can push through my anxiety and survive. It's fine. And it's allowed me to build the life I have now. But there's always a payback. So every time I push through anxiety, the next day I would be really, really exhausted. Which makes sense because it's a lot of adrenaline going through my system, whether it's doing a talk, going to an event. You know, all of these things spike my adrenaline. I have to cope with that throughout the day, and then the next day I'm tired. Makes sense, right? So for years, as you've known, I've had this system of mine called time that I did my TED talk about, where I plan ahead. So if I know I've got an event happening, I make sure that the day after that event I can rest. And that has worked for me for years. But with chronic fatigue, the fatigue part doesn't always follow logical sense. And what I mean by this is what you have with chronic fatigue that hallmarks it out as very distinct and different to everything else is something called post-exertional malaise, or PEM. And what PEM is a delayed response, so a delayed flare-up of symptoms or a delayed huge level of fatigue to something you did a couple of days ago. So when you exert some energy, the effect of that isn't always felt straight away. It can be felt up to 72 hours ahead. And it's not always the obvious things. Because with chronic fatigue syndrome, because of the way the body doesn't produce energy, it takes so much out of you doing the smallest thing. So things like getting out of bed, having a shower, cooking a meal, going for a walk around the block to the shop, a short 5-minute walk. All of those can be too much for someone with ME, and then you can feel fine doing it, but then the day after, or even the day after that, suddenly you get the full bout of a crash because of that energy output. And it really is minuscule energy. We're not talking about going for a run and then being exhausted 3 days later for a week. We're talking a shower and then the next day suddenly crashing. That's why I call this fatigue chess, because I can't plan ahead. I can feel fine. Something I do can look really small, look really innocent, and then cause a huge, huge crash. A few weeks back, actually just before Christmas, I went to see River Dance, which I love. Now, Chris drove us. We only parked the car, crossed the road, went into the theatre, sat down, watched it, loved it, walked out of the theatre, over to the car, drove home. The next day I was okay. The day after, I had a huge crash, huge flare-up of symptoms that lasted about 2 weeks. And you just think something as wonderful as the theatre, but the sensory effect or the cognition of everything that was going on just exhausted my system and I had a crash. You know, and I've realised that I can't even do the smallest of walks now without having a huge crash a couple of days after. So, to manage this post-exertional fatigue, this is where pacing comes into play. So rather than just planning ahead, okay, I'm going to do something today and rest tomorrow, you can't think like that. You've got to pick apart every tiny thing you do. So this starts by charting your activity over a few weeks, which I've done. So every single half an hour of every single day, writing down what I did and how I felt, so that I can see what activities cause me to be fatigued and have symptoms and which don't. And then what you do from that data that you gather is look at how much you can do without bringing on symptoms and then half it, just to be safe. And then the idea is, with this energy envelope that you know how much you can do without a crash, you stay at that, and then that means you level out and you avoid crashes. If only that worked. I've just had absolutely no luck with it. It doesn't matter how little I do, I'm still crashing. I have now stopped pretty much everything in my life. I'm doing only the very barest of work. I'm talking an hour or two a week at the most, because most days I can't manage it. You know, if I look at my chart about how much I'm managing over a month, it's about 10 hours a month if I'm lucky. And I've stopped everything I'm doing. I'm not going out. I'm pretty much in bed most days, working in bed, just laying in bed, completely zonked out in bed. I can't walk because when I do, I'm exhausted. I am shrinking my life down further and further, and yet I'm still crashing. This is really, really frustrating, and I'm talking to lots of different people who also have ME, CFS on forums, and most people are saying that the reason is because I'm in the very early days of this illness. Now, I might have had this illness for a while, but I've been pushing through it up until a few months ago because I thought it was my thyroid, and I thought I couldn't do myself any damage by pushing through that tiredness and just getting stuff done. Now I realise that every time you push through chronic fatigue, you actually make yourself worse. You reactivate the illness. The only way to recover and level out symptoms is to really heavily reduce and pace. So all this pushing over was doing me damage. I didn't know that. So now I do. I am no longer pushing over that. So really, even though I might have had this a while, I'm still only in the early days of managing it, if that makes sense. And this is apparently why I'm not really seeing much of an effect at the moment from pacing. So I'm holding that in mind and trying not to be impatient and frustrated with myself. And if I look, although in some ways my fatigue does seem to be getting worse, my other symptoms are settling. And actually the fatigue is settling a bit as well, because I was literally crashing, coming back up to an okay level, crashing, coming back up to an okay level. And now I'm much more like this, where I'm having really awful crash days, but they're not as low as they once were. Still awful, but not middle of the earth bucket level awful. So they are levelling, and some of the symptoms like the sweating has calmed down a bit. The heart palpitations and pounding have calmed down a bit. The headaches aren't as intense and as often as they were. So maybe there is some shift. It's just very subtle. And I just need to keep at it. I think that's what this is, that I just need an extended amount of time. Now, I am also questioning whether I need to just stop everything and rest, because I can't do any less than I'm already doing now, because I'm doing so less, I'm pretty much not moving. So the next level down is to do nothing. And I find this really difficult because the trouble is, you see, mental health and physical health is interconnected. And although this is a physical condition, ME, it affects my mental health. And if I stop everything I do, I'm going to be so depressed that that's going to affect me physically anyway. So I'm finding this really hard to know what to do. Do I just completely stop for a period of time? I tried a couple of weeks over Christmas doing nothing, and I didn't see any improvement. Maybe I need 2 or 3 months off doing nothing. But that terrifies me. So give up my speaking work, my writing work, making videos. I just don't want to do that. Ideally, I'd like to find a level with this pacing that I can manage over time. That would be great. And that's why I'm hoping that I get an official referral soon to our ME service so they can help me to work a way forward with this and to give me some emotional support, because it is really tough. I'm trying my hardest not to get frustrated, because that makes me ill. I can't be frustrated, and just be patient and just accept. You know, I say these things to other people. It's always hard, isn't it, to do it ourselves? But at the moment, it really does feel like my life is falling through my hands like grains of sand. And it's hard not to be sad, because I've worked so hard to build the life I have now. You know, I'm going to do a separate video about this, because there's a lot of grief involved when you become ill, in terms of kind of accepting new way of living and losing things, you know. So I'm going to make a separate video about that, but I am hoping at some point to find that pacing is working, but it isn't right now. It really, really isn't. And I'm just bearing in mind what people tell me, that it's just going to take time. And in the meantime, I have to keep playing this fatigue chess until I work out what's safe for me to do and what isn't, really. It's tough. I keep reminding myself that this is a brand new journey, and at the beginning of any journey, it is terrifying. You don't know everything. I'm learning so much right now about what causes ME, how you can manage ME, whether you can recover from ME. I'm learning about bodily systems and understanding all that. This is very much like when I first started to transition, and I knew nothing, and it was terrifying. But then gradually, over time, the picture made sense and I could move forward. And I know it'll be the same with this, that over time, I'll understand this more and more, I'll understand myself more and more, and I'll find a way of making life work in a new way, because this is going to have to be a permanent change. As I mentioned in my other videos about realising that there's a lot of trauma that's involved in causing ME, and how much has been held in my body that I didn't realise, and how much I do have this personality type of overworking and having a high level of achievement and perfectionism that's definitely played a part in this as well. So my life does have to change regardless, I know that. But if I can at least do my videos, writing and speaking, I'll be happy. And I won't have to change the world, you know, so I don't know. But I'm really grateful to everybody who has messaged me on here and on my social media, sharing advice, people who are going through this themselves, have gone through this themselves, your advice, recommendations for books and podcasts. I'm really appreciative, so please do keep them coming. There's going to be a video following this in the next couple of weeks where I'm going to talk about how I'm going to move forward in terms of the work I'm doing, because I do want to still keep making videos as much as I can. So I'm grateful in the meantime that you're really patient, that they're just not very regular, just making them when I can. But I will update you about that. But yes, thanks folks, as always, for checking in with me and looking out for me. Do come and find me on my other social media, because although I'm not everywhere, I am checking in here and there at various places over the week. So you can find links to all my social media in the description below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you very soon.